This is Richard Harris from Sales Hacker. Very glad to have everybody here in attendance. We appreciate it. I'm the Director of Sales Training and Consulting Services here at Sales Hacker. Our hosts and sponsors for today, one is Help Scout, and we have Matt Patterson, who is the customer service evangelist over at Help Scout. He started his professional life as the head of a small tech support team back in the 90s. I know what that was like when tech support really was tough back then compared to now. And he was quickly removed from that role, but not in the way that you might think. He moved on to greener pastures, staying with the company, that is. After spending years as a web designer, he left a role to go and work for Sydney Taronga Zoo. Is that right, Matt?
Taronga Zoo.
Yeah, running the customer service and building as a web designer there. And then eventually moved over to the customer service team at Campaign Monitor. And then after about 9 years of growing customer service there at Campaign Monitor, he joined Help Scout, where he now preaches the good word on customer service. And we're very specifically using that word today, which we'll elaborate on in a minute. I also want to take a moment and introduce our good friends over at Pipedrive. They've been long supporters and friends of Sales Hacker, and so we're very glad to have them with us. This is Daniel Gavin, who's the head of sales and support. Which again, we're going to talk about combining sales and support, which might be different for a lot of people. He's been with Pipedrive since mid-2015, and he also has a strong background in lead development with roles at both Intuit and Demandforce. So he really brings a great perspective from this sales side into this support side. And I think, Daniel, you've got a fire alarm going off in the background, right?
Yeah, and we're in Manhattan, so there's sirens all the time. So I'll try to mute it when I get too loud.
Great. And Matt, what part of the globe are you in?
I am right on the other end of the globe down here in Australia, just south of Sydney, and it is quite dark still here at the moment.
Oh, is it? All right. Well, we appreciate you either staying up late or getting up early to do this, whichever it is. None of us will hold it against you if you happen to have a pint of something. Adult beverages. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. You know, we're talking today about sales and support. And it's interesting because oftentimes we'll hear support or customer service, and we'll often think of, you know, here in the United States, it's the local cable company as customer service, right? Or your internet provider. That's what we think, but in today's sales world, that's completely different. It's starting to change, and we're also, you know, I guess I'll turn it over to the two of you. Why are we calling it sales and support now, rather than what I think?
Go ahead, Matt. You'll start.
So, yeah, you're right. Like the term customer service, it's an incredibly broad term, and it covers so many different things. But certainly, my experience in the last decade or so in software companies, like online customer service and sales blur together so much because there's so much of a self-service element to it. Customers and prospective customers can find you, start to interact with you through the support channel before they ever talk to an official salesperson. So I think see that blurring of the lines and the margins between them just disappear at certain sizes, and that's where you get a lot of the conflict and the confusion from as well, I think.
Yep. Yeah, and from what I've seen over the past decade or so as well, is that the customer doesn't really care about who they're talking to, and they're looking for customer service, whether that be from a salesperson or a support person. It's whoever they're talking to in the moment they'd like the answers from, and whether if that's on pricing or messaging or the actual technical help, they don't want to be passed around or press 1 or press 2 for a certain department and wait on hold. It's whoever picks up the phone or answers their chat should have comprehensive knowledge about both sides of the coin, and making sure that when they leave that interaction that they have the information they need and next steps associated with that. So it's just the lines have become so blurred because the customer demands a better experience, and it is a better experience if whoever they're talking to provides what they're looking for and more.
Yeah. So one of the things, you're sort of, I think, alluding to this, so I'll put this phrase out there for you, Daniel, is, we're talking about sort of this, how do we create the right value proposition, creating harmony between departments, whether sales is a part of support, support is a part of sales, whether they're still in their own silos, like, the way I think about it is I land on a website and, the chat box now pops up, right? That's the first thing. Is that sales who's managing that chat box? Is it support or service that's managing that chat bot? How do you align that piece, and how have you guys approached that? Let me just stop there. I know what's coming because we did this prep call yesterday, so I'm excited about it, but I don't want to steal your thunders.
Yeah, I think companies are figuring this out right now. I think this is part of it, is that some people are using that first interaction with a BDR, SDR, LDR who's doing the development of the questions to understand where that should go ultimately. Other organizations are using it as a support function to say, hey, we'd rather have this person have the technical expertise to be able to answer the more complex things, and then as well hand it off to where it needs to go. And so I think there are two different approaches that different companies are taking. Here at Pipedrive, a lot of the times, our customers, as they're looking for service, end up with our support line. And we're asking our support people to act, A, answer questions that need to be answered on the most technical side, but then B, find out more information to see if they need to talk to a salesperson. So they are actually versed in some of the qualifying aspects that traditional entry level or frontline sales people have, which is how big are you, what are you looking to do, what are you trying to accomplish. And sometimes, and this is what I find most of the time, is that the customer doesn't know who they should be talking to. They think they're in trial, so they should be talking to a salesperson. Just because it's in their brain, that's who they should be talking to. But they come in and it's actually a very technical question, but they're used to talking to a salesperson during that time. And so they may chat in, call in and say, hey, I want to talk to a salesperson. And we've worked with our support people to say, hey, just so I get you in the hands of the right person, what exactly is it that you're looking for, and how can I help you in this first interaction to make sure that I'm not passing you off to somebody else who's then going to pass you right back to me. And that comes back to the kind of customer support or customer service as a whole picture of trying to answer the right question with whoever is having that first interaction with the person.
That's great. I think that's really solid. Matthew, how are you guys doing it, or are you mirroring what they're doing at Pipedrive? This is your business, by the way, so
Exactly. So there are definitely similarities there. I think you asked the question, like, who owns that that chatbot pops up, who owns that? And I've seen it done both ways. And I think what ended up happening in my past job and in HelpScout too is you put it up there, you have an idea in your mind about, oh, this is going to be like a great sales channel for us, and then you find out what the customers actually are going to ask.
Yeah.
And they will ask what they're going to ask. You can tell them, if you want to talk to a salesperson, chat here. They'll ask support questions, or the other way around. It's kind of really customer driven, and so there's no point trying to fight that. Yeah. What you can do, I guess, is you put that channel on a different page. You might get a different set of questions coming in because people have different expectations depending on where they came from and what they land on and what they see. So a lot of it is kind of customer driven.
Yep. How do you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it depends on, especially in small companies, like that's value proposition changes so much when the product, like this month we're targeting here, and then we're swinging around, we're targeting over here, getting everybody kind of aligned on what that is and what the messaging is sometimes a challenge.
And I think this is going to be a reoccurring theme, is that what you expect is generally not what happens. Like Matt was saying there, like you put it on your front page, you assume it's going to be a sales channel for you, and then people are asking technical questions, and then you move whoever answers the chat to support, and then your support function, and then all of a sudden a million sales questions come in. So no matter what you do, the customer is going to drive it, and you have to keep pivoting.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. By the way, we have a couple people making some comments in the question field. I'd love you to put them over in the chat field so everybody can see them, because I believe I'm the only one seeing the question stuff. But I love that people are actually commenting on this and providing their own input. So let's talk about that for a second, because, back in my day, right, I get to sound like that old guy in the 90s, it was always a battle of who gets to answer the 800 number. Right? Should support answer the 800 number, or should sales answer? Because sales was always like, well, sales should come first, right? Because that's just how we're minded. And we didn't, at that stage of the game, there wasn't a lot of trust between the departments. I think those silos have broken down quite a bit now that it's the 21st century. But let's talk about something that's really important. Regardless of who's monitoring it, it still comes back to the right messaging of that person, right? That person needs to have a certain level of knowledge, and that messaging really needs to be consistent with both sales and marketing, right? Along with, okay, well, how do we manage that from this support side, service side piece? How are you each managing that? Who controls that messaging? Is it sales? Is it marketing? Or do you let the service team create their own stuff?
Yeah, I think for small companies, often it kind of happens by default. Like at Campaign Monitor, where I was before, and I was running the support, and there was no sales for a long time. There was no marketing, and so the messaging was whatever kind of we came up with on the fly as we were talking to customers. Mm-hmm. And that can work. You've got a great product, that can work. You understand it quite deeply, but then when you start to add a sales team or a marketing team in there, they have their own messaging, and that might conflict, or you might have a different audience. And so I think, figuring out who owned that for us, for Campaign Monitor, it took until we got a PR person in who kind of sat down really with everybody and like, let's just sort this out. We're all going to say the same thing. Help Scout has a much clearer sense of who the customers are and what they're trying to say. And I think that's come right down from the top, from the CEO level.
So did you guys have like a triage team of like, hey, here's someone from sales, here's someone from support, here's someone from marketing, and you all would sit in a room and come up with that messaging? Is it that kind of a thing? Or did you actually have someone who interviewed all those people and then said, hey, everybody, here's what I think the messaging should be, and then get feedback that way? Like, how did that work for you?
Yeah, so the Campaign Monitor example, we had a CEO, the first CEO we ever had came in and just kind of interviewed everybody, sat down and did 100 different interviews, then came back and said, I'm just going to reflect back to you, this is what you say about the company. And then we're just going to tidy that up a bit and make it a bit more clear for everybody, because sometimes the engineers have a different idea about what the product does and why than the support people do who are talking to customers, and then the salespeople who are talking to customers that you want to have but you don't have yet have a different perspective again. So that was a really useful process, and I think it just kind of got everybody on the same path.
I think for us, as Matt was saying, we didn't have a sales team for a long time, and support, but obviously we had a support function. And as we developed the sales team, we realized we had to inform our support agents of that messaging, because they started to say, hey, when we ask these questions that you ask us to do, to understand, to give the customer the best experience possible, they're sometimes asking us very specific things and say, hey, in 30 seconds, tell me what you guys do. And as Matt was saying, you're just kind of, at the beginning, they're just kind of making it up, doing the best they could, but it wasn't a flow that we had. And as we built out the sales function and created their messaging, we had to start passing it over to the support side. And that's why at Pipedrive, we actually have sales and support. They sit together physically. They are managed by the same people. And all the meetings are cross-functional. So I have a counterpart who is in Estonia who runs the sales and support there. And he and I meet once a week. And we meet with our marketing department regularly for that messaging. But then I sit on his support and sales managers' calls, and he sits on mine to make sure that we're passing along that information that's pertinent. We don't expect our support people to be expert salespeople or vice versa, but we do want them to have that very high-level information that they need to give that customer, that the experience that our customers demand of not being passed off for a very basic question. Just simply, what's your pricing? There was a time where it was just, spat out, but now we talk about, okay, let's talk about pricing and the value associated with it.
Yep. I think that's great. I think that, how do you know whether it's sales or support? And we didn't talk about this yesterday, so I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball. But how do you decide who's the right personality to manage that chat feature? Because that feature can get pretty busy. I would suspect, particularly on the Pipedrive side, as big as you guys are, right? It's almost like having a different kind of inbound team. And specifically, what I'm looking for is there something unique about their dynamic mindset and what they're able to accomplish that's different than a traditional sales role? Is it a support person, but maybe people tag team in and out, so that someone's just not sitting there typing all day responding to the chat box? Or do you want that so that they can become the professional at that pace. And then I think this is the most critical thing is how soon do you put someone on there? Because I can see in a lot of cases, particularly with the startup sizes, that you put your young green person on there because they just need to get used to having these conversations. That's the mentality sometimes that I see. So, it's a lot of questions in there, but I'll let each of you sort of take a stab at it. Hope I gave you enough time to think of a good answer.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think at Help Scout, kind of approach is like you want to have that might be the first thing that someone does with your company, like that might be the very first interaction. And so whoever they're talking to, if they need to have that really deep product knowledge, because anything can happen. Like a chat, you have such a wide range of possible subjects because there's no qualification coming in. You don't know who they are or what they want. And so we try and we've had both sales and support, and we've moved our support team, sort of like Danny was saying, support is now a support-driven growth team. So they're part of the growth team with the sales and the marketing as well. And so we are trying to give support people exposure to the sales side of it there. But having someone there full-time, it's super hard work, especially when it gets busy. And especially if you don't know, like if you try and throw someone who is really green on there, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed because you've got people asking questions that you have to spend time looking up the answer for at the same time as someone else is chatting. I think it can get super intense. So my personal perspective is always like, that's somewhere where you need to have someone who's really confident about the answers, who can just be talking to 3 different people and having 3 conversations at once and giving everybody a good experience, because bad chat experience is sort of way worse than a bad email experience because you expect so much more from the timeliness of it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great, I love that statement. A bad chat experience is worse than a bad email experience. I think we've all experienced that in our own lives. But Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah, so for us, similar to Matt, and it's kind of similar business model, so that's why I think we get a lot of overlap here, but we actually put our most seasoned people on chat, because when you're trying to, it's chaotic, and we do, when people are ramping up on our support side, because that is who is on our chat function right now, they first start off just doing email exchanges to understand what our customers want, and then we start to build them from 1 chat to 2 chats and build that on them, because it can become overwhelming and it is chaotic. It's like answering the phone. You never know what's going to come at you. It could be a really hard call. It could be a really easy call. And so we actually try as much as we can to season our reps first before we throw them into the fire.
That's great. So we have a question coming in from the audience, which I want to go ahead and bring up, which is, how do you decide when to turn on the chat feature, right? I know that we're getting very granular in the moment of sales and support, but I do think it's a relevant question. 10-person startup's very different than a 100-person startup and a 200-person startup. And maybe Matt, just because, with Help Scout, that's kind of, really in your wheelhouse. Like, what are y'all seeing with your clients?
Yeah, that's there's a few things to think about. Obviously, you need to know your capacity, like how many realistically could you actually do? How many chats could you do? Because you're taking someone off another channel probably, like you're losing someone out of email support to monitor the chat. Something that you can do is, you don't have to put your chat on the main homepage, right? You can do it. You can put it into a sub page, like stick it on the pricing page. If you're just trying to target people who are really thinking about buying the product, put the chat that only pops up when you're on the pricing page. You're sort of pre-qualifying a little bit, and you're also restricting the volume, and so you can manage that a bit more easily. What else have I done? I've also done having chat just appear during certain hours. So when we knew we had the most coverage in the support team, like we just turn it on for these hours, and it just won't appear there. So we don't have that horrible, like, here's a chat button that you can press that tells you can't do anything. Like, that's super frustrating. But having it so that if you're on there and that when we have capacity to help you over chat, then you can see the chat and it's up there and it's visible for you.
Great. Daniel, what was been your experience in this world?
Yeah, so turning on chat, it was an experience for us just in general, because when we turned it on, we put it in a very obvious spot. We put it on in a very obvious spot, and it popped up right away. And so people were just chatting in hi. And we didn't realize that when we did that, it was going to create this, people were just saying, didn't know what to do with it. And so we were getting hundreds and hundreds of chats, an hour at a time when we weren't, staffed for that. And it was just people just curious about what the function was. And so for us, we made the transition and turned on chat when we found our phone queue starting to get too long, where people were starting to wait too long, because we knew that we could deliver up to 3 conversations at a time, and it's in the effectiveness and the times that we wanted to. And like Matt was saying, we've played with when it pops up, where it pops up, do you have to be on a page for a certain amount of time, certain geographies, what languages do we support, because Pipedrive is localized in 13 languages, which is great, but we don't have 13 languages staffed at a time. And so we have been selective in how, when, and where it pops up, because if you just let it pop up right away, the tidal wave is coming.
Yep. Yep. We're getting some great comments and questions. I want to sort of bring those up. Do you see the chat box lowering a lower cost of customer engagement? Do you see it helping with that piece? Or do you feel that, and if so, how? When you say lower, is that in context to a phone call? Is that in context to an email? Like, how do you guys measure that from a cost perspective?
I think you hit the key point there, which is it depends where you're coming from. So if you were offering phone support, then chat is going to be probably quite a lot cheaper, because you can chat to 3 people at the same time, and you can get through those things quicker. But email, on the other hand, is super easy to scale, and you can have one person doing 70 tickets in a day, and they probably couldn't have those many conversations, right? So you have to understand what your costs are right now.
Yep.
I did find that chat for certain types of questions, it was vastly more efficient. Like people have a bunch of, especially people who are just finding it and like, oh, I just have like 5 questions, which are really obvious. They could find them all on the website, but they just don't want to browse around. Fair enough. They've got
guilty. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
They've got
want to refresh, right?
Yeah, and they're going to ask those questions one way or the other. It's either going to be 5 emails over a period of time, or they can just jump on with someone and go, here's my first question, or your answer makes me ask a second question, a third question, a fourth question. We get them all done, and that person then is like moved on to the next stage in a couple of minutes instead of maybe over a couple of days of email back and forth.
Yeah, that's what we found was, the real-time conversation, as well as being able to go deeper into conversation that you would on a phone call, but being able to do multiple ones of those at the same time. So it depends where you're coming from. Much better than a phone call from a cost perspective, just from you can do multiple. What we've experienced is that customers are now expecting it too. They don't see it. I think there was a time where the chat function was, I'd rather call, I'd rather email. People are just so used to the instant messaging across all platforms that they're used to typing very quickly and having a conversation with somebody that way.
That's great. That's really great. I want to sort of pull us back out, because we got very deep on this one particular topic, and it's not about the chat box today, but I think we've certainly covered that and could probably go on for a while. Let's talk about the handoffs, right? Like, so you do have a service or support person managing this channel, and it does turn into something that's a sales thing. How do they know that it really should go to sales, right? Because someone, as you said, someone could be asking about pricing, or someone could be asking something about, well, does your product do this, which may be a service-oriented question, but they may not be asking it from a service perspective. The person on the box, on the monitoring, may not know whether or not they're even a customer at this point. So how do you work well to make sure that there's a good handoff between the departments?
Daniel, you might be able to.
Yeah, sorry, siren went right by, so I had to stay on mute there for an extra beat. So we found, no matter what, and this was, as I was mentioning before, kind of iterating, and the change that occurs with a lot of this is, we said, as these things come through the channels, if someone asks for sales, send it over to sales. If someone asks a technical question, you keep it. And what we started to find was that no matter how many iterations we made and how many conversation paths we made, and there's always exceptions to it. And when someone says, I want to talk to sales, do they really want to talk to sales, as I mentioned before, or can we actually probe just a little bit, ask a couple more questions to get them, because their question might actually be technical. And so in a free trial environment, we have a 14-day free trial. We ask our support agents to ask those additional questions right at the beginning to say, hey, why are you writing in? Let's get beyond why you think you're writing in and who you think you should be talking to. Additionally, we try to focus it as a service element, that we want to get the person into the hands of the right function inside the company. So we have multiple sales agents in different parts of the world, as well as some people that handle larger accounts, some people handle smaller accounts. And so what we ask our agents to do is ask those qualifying questions that sometimes BDRs and LDRs and SDRs do. And what that does is it allows us to then, by saying, hey, just so I get you in the hands of the right person, tell me these things, and let's have a little bit of a conversation before I pass you off. And then at that point we say, okay, this is who's going to contact you, and set an expectation of when they will contact you. And hey, I just I yelled out to my sales guy over there who deals with people in your area, and he'll reach out to you, he'll call you in 5 minutes. Or actually they're offline, that person is actually based in Estonia, and they won't be able to get to you tomorrow, so I just want to set the right expectation for you. And so it's taken some left turns, right turns, and figuring it out as we go, as we built out the sales org, that as soon as someone, like Richard, you were saying earlier, when someone says sales starts jumping up and down, going hot lead, hot lead, hot lead, give it to me. And then we get on the phone with them, and it would be not a conversation we'd really want to be having, because it was actually a paying customer who was just, chatting in through a different email address. So it took some iterations, it took some lefts and rights, but over time we think we've developed this, and this is where we talked about the customer service part of it, is that by asking those questions we can get the person in the hands of the right function inside the company, and then they get a better experience out of it. But it's taken a little while, and we still get those cases where someone sneaks through the cracks.
Matt, anything to add on that one?
Very much the same kind of experience. That same kind of developing guidelines and then finding out, the guidelines kind of don't work in this case, and then just trying to build up enough of judgment on each side. So from sales to support and support to sales, just to figure out when should we do that transition and how do we handle the transition. And I think that was useful for Help Scout team is giving them. And you have to have a bit of practice of this when there is no sales team, because people ask to talk to sales, and then you have to find a way to well, let's work with you anyway, even though we don't have a salesperson to refer you to. So to kind of develop that skill, but giving them some wording, here's how we can frame those questions. Yeah, look, I'm happy to set up a call for you, but just so make sure that it's going to be an effective use of your time, just let me know what you're going to ask, and then I can prepare that person, and then often you can just, you don't need to talk to sales to answer that for you.
It's actually something that we teach in sales training. It's called the question behind the question. So many times people will come in with a question, but that's not the question they really want answered, and they don't even realize it. So I've been teaching people for years now to sort of say, hey, to your point, hey, we want to make sure you get you to the right person, but what do you mean when you say you want to discuss pricing? Because that can mean 1,000 different things depending on who we talk to, and I don't want to transfer you to the wrong person. So the goal is to always ask for a clarification based on what they meant by their initial question. And usually the answer to that is what they're really looking for, not what they came in and asked for. So,
and just one other point on that, Richard, is that one of the challenges I think that we've faced as we kind of built this out was because you blur the lines so much, is that people end up spending more time doing the thing that you actually didn't hire them to do, and what you're not monitoring and looking at their KPIs on. And so, it is somewhat of a dance in that you don't want your support people spending too much time doing sales, and you don't want your salespeople spending too much time doing support. And I would say that especially coming from sales side, and what I'm judged on and what my sales teams are judged on, I want them selling as much as possible. So those are more conversations that we've had to have over time. Is that, yes, while we want to put the customer first and have a great experience with whomever they're interacting in that moment, we do have to cut off conversations. We do have to say, okay, I am going to have to hand you off to somebody else to do this, whether it's from sales or support or back. And that's actually something that we've had to learn over time, because sometimes you get support people that love having sales calls, and salespeople that kind of want to hide and do some support calls and say, hey, I had to stay on that call for an hour because they really needed my help and I was on the phone with them. And
Right.
so that's been a little bit of a learning and iterating process for us as we've built through it. Is while you blur the lines, you still have to make sure people focus on their core responsibilities.
Sure. Just again, another question coming from the audience, which I think is relevant. I'm sort of surprised we didn't think about it yesterday, which is, how do you see this affecting your customer sat scores, right? Are you measuring that stuff yet? And you guys are might be bigger organizations than some people listening. Other companies may be of equal size or larger as well. Is that sort of your ultimate driver? Is that to tell you if you're making the right decisions?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, obviously customer satisfaction is a huge deal. But of course, you're trying to measure how happy someone is with the outcome of the conversation, and a sales call and a sales situation is very different than a support interaction for an existing customer.
True.
So I think when do you choose to ask for that measurement, and what are you actually trying to get? And I think it doesn't help a lot when someone's asking, like, can your product do this thing? If you get some feedback, if you tell them no as a support person, you get negative feedback, and like, that's not really about our level of customer service. That's product feedback that should go, valid feedback. It's not really judging the level of service, it's judging the product. So finding a way to apply the right measurements to the right parts of the company, it takes a little bit of fiddling sometimes, or it takes, some judgment when you're doing the reporting.
Yeah, I mean, CSAT is such an easy driver and an easy thing to kind of rely on. But as we dig into it more and more, there are those, let's say it's a product feature that isn't there and someone rates you poorly for that. Is that really the interaction because of the agent that they spoke to, or because just product doesn't deliver on something, whether it's a priority of ours or not? And so CSAT's a good thing, but we don't hang our hat on that. I mean, we do well, but it's not something that we're focusing on as a driver. We focus on just providing great experiences, and we hope that our customers appreciate it that way. Because I think if you get too caught up in just the data of improving your CSAT score, you're going to make some decisions that aren't in the best interest of your customers, even though it may drive up your CSAT score.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit more about the handoffs and the types of handoffs, right? Like we talked about this yesterday, and it's everything starts here, and then it starts to get like this, right? Right. Every unique piece of the funnel has a different way of doing things. How do you manage the different types of handoffs? What does that look like for you guys, each of you?
So I'm thinking about the Help Scout side. So the handoff of, say, someone who's worked with sales. We heard a little bit from Tim in our prep call yesterday. Someone who's worked with Tim and has come in and has been sold, and then there's a transition period where you're trying to say, like, you're kind of onboarded now. If you have questions of a certain type, you can still come back to talk to me, but most of your questions are now going to be product related or usage related that should go to support. And setting that expectation with the customer, if you do that nicely, it makes everything better. And if the context, especially, and this is where that integration with like a pipe drive, pulling stuff into the help desk so that the support team knows, oh, this person, they've talked to Tim, they've gone through onboarding. We can assume they know certain things. We know the language that he uses when he describes things, and so we can talk to this person in a way different than we would to someone who's just coming direct to us, who maybe has no context for what the product does and why it works the way it works. So, if you get your handoffs right, you make life so much easier for everybody.
Yep.
Yeah. So the customer experience and how they come in also affects the how you're going to deal with them and where they are in their life cycle, right? Is really important. So at Pipedrive, we want to be as intensive with our customers at the beginning of their life cycle, whether that in trial specifically, because that's how we know we can lead to conversion. And then if they do come back, our sales team encourages them to go to support, as Matt was saying. But as they come in, we want to know, let's say on the handoff, if somebody's in trial where are they coming from? It's going to dictate, are they coming from a competitor or from a much larger more powerful tool than we are? Or are they coming from a free, Excel, because being a CRM, people are doing this all sorts of different ways. And so what we need to do is make sure that we're asking those questions, asking them to fill out a form here, gathering little pieces of information, kind of breadcrumbs, so that we can then hand it off to like we said earlier, the right person, and by size, and that way the salesperson or the support person coming into the call has all the information they need to be successful in that interaction. And so it's kind of breadcrumbs along the way of how have we interacted with them in the past? Have they opened up emails? Have they not opened up emails? Have they gone to a webinar? What's their baseline knowledge? And that's going to help dictate a lot of the conversations that we have with them. And if you can perfect that, which I'd say we're trying to, but if you can perfect that goes a long way for your customers to be able to speak to them at their level, which is all of a sudden they know that you are answering the right type of questions, rather than, hey, did you plug and unplug your computer conversation that we've all had, which every cable conversation seems to start with, whether no matter what you're calling for.
Yeah, exactly. That irritates all of us, right? Yeah. Equally. So let's bring that up. Do you run into that? And I say this from a sales point of view. I've always said that if you're in sales and you're not one of the most paranoid people in the company, you're not doing your job right, because you always think the worst is going to happen. Do you feel like this sort of level of service and support creates extra frustration and friction for the customer, or is that frustration and friction actually a good friction to have because they realize they're going to get to the right place faster rather than just put me on the phone with a human being?
I think it can be. The problem is for the customer is when it feels like, oh, the sales was a different company than the rest of the company. Like, oh, I had this amazing experience and now I've got to deal with these other people who don't know who I am, who don't know any of the context, and we haven't had long chats about our families and whatever. And it just feels like, wait, these are not the people that I signed up to work with. And it's often not, it's nothing to do with the support person either. It's just that they don't know this person. They haven't had hours on the phone with them. So they're kind of starting from scratch. And if they're not well informed, if their handover hasn't happened well, then yeah, it can be really jarring for the customer and frustrating for both sides of that, because nobody wants their sale to fall apart after they've made the sale, right? Because the first experiences afterwards weren't good.
Well, and sales is never overpromised on a product ever.
Never, not once, not ever. I've never done it, so not guilty. So
yeah. So I think it definitely. I think as long as you're prefacing about putting the person in the hands of the right person to answer their questions, the expert in that, whatever it is that they're looking for, they're appreciative of it. Whether they know what's really going on behind the scenes or not, if I have to put somebody on hold or ask somebody to wait for a second to get them in the hands of the right person, and that person delivers on what I say they're going to deliver on or answers the question, they walk away happy. And we do that on occasion. I always say on the sales team, it's okay to say, I don't know, can I put you on hold and go check? Because the person would rather get the right answer than the wrong answer and be upset 2 months later because sales overpromised. And so what we've really focused on here is asking that question, get the right answer, deliver it. And people are willing to wait slightly longer, maybe talk to a second person if that person can be the expert in that area that you're looking for. So I don't think, as long as you're delivering on what you're saying you are and you're putting in the person in the hands, I think customers are actually appreciative of it in the long run.
Right. So let's talk about each of you individually for a second. So salespeople have a certain mindset. Accounting people have a certain mindset. We're wired differently. We acknowledge that. What makes you guys so passionate about customer experience? And Daniel, I'm very fascinated because you combine support and sales, and most salespeople I know want to do nothing with support. It's like, here, I sold it, you go fix it, right? Hi, you want to buy something? Great, hold for customer success. What makes you guys so passionate about this part of the process for the customer?
Well, I think for me, it makes sense, period, especially in the environment that I'm in right now. If you had a super highly technical tool and the salespeople are, having different types of relationships, it can be different. But we're here, we're in a highly transactional sale that has a lot of complexity to it. If we have to keep passing people back and forth, it's just not a good customer experience. And so for me, I would say I'm passionate about it because I think it's going to make the company more successful in the long run, in that delivering the right experience at the right time can be powerful. And I think from my standpoint, I don't, I try to come at it as a consumer. What would I want? And I do think, like you're saying, Richard, earlier, I don't want to I hate calling the cable company. I'd rather cut the cord than deal with them again, right? And I think that's probably some of the frustrations people have, besides the pricing on it, is that you feel like you're just a number. Well, for me, I would rather deliver the right experience at the right time for our customers, and I think that's going to make us successful in the long run, and that has been a message top down in our company from our founders and our CEO, that deliver for our customers. Our product works. If you deliver it in the right way at the right time, the company will continue to grow. And rather than just saying, nope, not my responsibility, talk to support, or not my responsibility, talk to sales, it's actually brought the company closer together and to work as more of a cohesive group. And we've worked at companies where sales and support are on different sides of the building, different sides of the world, and it just doesn't provide cohesive messaging. And then it can present some resentment between the groups too, because as Matt was saying, it's like, over-promising, under-delivering. I had a relationship with that guy, I want to have a relationship with you. And hiring the talented people who can deliver multiple messages and can do multiple things helps the customer. And that's the experience I want as a customer. So that's why I try to instill it in the teams that we have here.
Great. How about you, Matt? What makes you so passionate about it?
Well, so my experience has been on the support side. So the initial thing for me is that, just like you were saying, if it's been sold in a way that is misrepresenting what the product can actually do, or you're promising something which then we can't deliver because it doesn't exist, or because it's you didn't buy that, you bought a different thing. It's a terrible experience for the customer. It's super frustrating for the support people who, especially because they're getting judged on the customer satisfaction, they may end up with getting the negative end of that rating. It was nothing to do with them. Right? So from that personal perspective, that's why I think that kind of sucks for everybody. More generally, like from the Help Scout side, think about it like we want to treat people, the customers or the prospective customers, as individuals and not try and force everybody into the same process because that process works for us. I know that some people coming in, they don't want to talk to sales. They just want to be able to get in there and set it up and start using the product and have as little interaction as possible. And they love to talk to support because I just need a technical answer about how does this thing work. And you give me that and then you leave me alone and I'll figure it out. So having a way for those people to do that, but then for the other people, and I used to think like that all the time because I was in support, and I would think, well, surely everybody just wants to be like, don't hassle me, just let me do it. Right. And then I was going through the process in my past job of trying to change help desks, and I was looking at them all, and I'm like, I have not got the time to figure out whether this thing is going to do what I need it to do. I just need to keep everything running, and I need someone to come and like sit with me here and tell me, I've got these 5 questions, you tell me if it's going to work or not. And I'm like, oh, I guess that's a different process. Different people need that, and it's perfect for them. So getting the people into that funnel when it works for them, not forcing everyone into the same one, I think that's a big deal, and it can make a big difference to the whole customer experience.
Sure. What kind of tools are you guys using to support your sales and support services, right? How do you guys do that internally, whether it's cross-pollination of messaging, creating a repository for best practices or best comments when this objection or this challenge comes up? How do you guys cross-communicate that stuff?
So for us, and I'm assuming Matt experiences the same thing since he's on the other side of the world. So Pipedrive has multiple offices across the world, and that presents challenges, especially with time zones. We use Slack, but I wake up in the morning and my Slack is full, right? Because 200 of our employees are based in Estonia, and they're wrapping up their day as I'm waking up in the morning and can be, there's this intense period of time. And so Slack is a great tool for communicating, but there's a lot of noise in there and a lot of things going on in there. So we use Confluence kind of as a company as a repository of processes and ways to track things and understand. Marketing's putting things in there and everybody's putting things in there, and that's a challenge too, because Confluence is a good tool, but it's a little hard to navigate if there are hundreds of thousands of pages in there, and searching for a phrase doesn't necessarily yield the results you're looking for. But that's what we rely on, and then lots of calls like this, lots of video calls with as many people as possible, because we call it structured casual time, or structured unstructured time, where you're trying to create that energy that you get from being in the same room as somebody, but being really far away. So if we could solve it better, we would, and we keep trying at it and coming up with new ways to do it and looking at new tools. But it can definitely be a challenge with having remote offices and different functions in different offices.
Sure. Matt, how about you? Because you are on the other side of the world from us. So.
Yeah, I am. And so my days, my crossover time, especially at this time of year with the daylight savings, is pretty limited. That's why I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But we use much the same set of tools. We have Slack. We just started using Confluence. Confluence, it's an Atlassian product. It's another Australian company, right? But they're an interesting one for this discussion, because they like to talk about, we have no salespeople, but of course they do have salespeople. They just more like support people who are doing sales kind of stuff.
Right.
It just came to me just then as I was saying it. But yeah, so we do the same thing. We have video chat. So when I get up in the morning, once a month there's like a town hall meeting. I'm not getting up at 1 a.m. to do that, to sit in on that, but it's all recorded and it's there available for me. And it's the whole company kind of going through team by team, like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're about, this is how we're talking about it to customers, giving the whole perspective of keeping everybody aligned with like what Help Scout is and why it exists and who it's good for and who it's not good for. All of that stuff, it just keeps getting repeated over and over so that everybody is exposed to that idea. And I find that super helpful.
What we talked about a lot of stuff today, and we sort of get to the bottom end of this conversation. What mistakes have you guys made? What things can you tell people not to do? Because you already did it twice, right? Any advice to folks?
Yeah.
The list is long.
I have made some mistakes. So I think conflicting messages across teams, like if you're not empowering your support people to have that sales perspective, to understand, like when someone asks you a question, like you were saying, Richard, like they ask you a question, they probably do need the answer to that question, but they probably a reason that they're asking it. There's probably a deeper need that they're trying to fill, like nobody is coming to use Help Scout because they want to be really good at using Help Scout. They want to provide better service to their customers. And so they're asking about a feature because they've got a problem and they think that feature might solve that problem. And if we give our support teams a little bit more time and a little bit more training, they can ask that question and figure out, okay, you're actually trying to do this, and that feature is not going to help for that. But here's this other thing that will actually help, or here's this article that we have on this topic, and we can provide better service because we're like mixing that support and sales thing. So I would say the mistakes that I see being made are like the hard line between sales and support, and trying to say like, you throw it over there, you don't touch that. And the same for salespeople. If you get salespeople who don't know at least some degree of the technical aspects or the product features, and they end up just throwing all those customers over there, you just end up building a divide between sales and support, where the support people don't respect the sales people because they don't know the product, and salespeople think, well, the support people are just ruining all of my sales by just focusing on the specific details, and they're angry with me. And yeah, I've been in places like that, and it's a very frustrating place to work.
Yep.
I would say for me it's been about rigidity and saying this is the way things are going to be moving forward. I've kind of adopted more of a, hey, this is how it's going to be for a little while until we figure out a better way to do this. And what I mean by that is whether it's messaging or the process or handoffs, the way you're doing things in our environments it's not as though we've been doing it for 40 years and we're assembly line and you're going to do it the same way for the next 30 years. It's always changing, and whether it's the customers we're trying to talk to or the process of what we do internally. And so I think I stood up a couple times and say, this is how we're doing it, and someone says, yeah, how long? And I'm like, forever. Not really, but you try to give that element of confidence rather than saying, hey, we're really going to learn from this. We're going to try this, see what we learn, and then we may change it. And everybody needs to be okay with that because we're trying to do what's best. But in false sense of bravado, I think I've stood up a couple times and stuck my foot in my mouth in hindsight.
I knew you were a sales guy at heart. I knew it. I think we were talking yesterday, Tim brought this up, he had this simple equation of sales plus support equals customer experience. Not even customer success, but just the experience. And if you provide the right experience, they will be successful, right? And I say this to a lot of my people I talk to is that, look, I may not be the right guy for you, right? I may not, so I want you to have a good experience with me, even if I'm not the right person, because that's karma. It's karma for me to say, hey, I'm not the person you want to hire for your particular need, right? I don't do PowerPoint training and how to deliver a PowerPoint presentation. That's not what Richard does. So, but I know people appreciate that honesty, and I think that's the most important thing that comes out. It really comes down to honesty. Where do you start? Let's say you're a startup and you're like, we got to figure this out. We don't even know where to start, when to start, how to start. What do you do? What's the piece of advice you give to folks?
I like to a couple of things. One is like that customer persona. I think that really helps to have everybody talking, because you can get support and salespeople talking about the customers in very different ways, and having like this idea of like, well, this person here that we both agree is our target customer. Let's talk about what the experience is like for that person. Because that gives you some direction when you're trying to figure out those processes. We're like, would this person enjoy that process, or would it be better in a different way? It's much more concrete that way. But the big thing for me is like just shared experiences. If you can get the salespeople to not just do sales, but also to spend some time doing support, or to spend some time answering like the onboarding questions of people that have previously been sold. And then if you get the support people to like, hey, just sit in on a couple of sales calls and listen to how they talk about the problems that they're having and how we're trying to solve them. Once the people have that shared experience, they find it much easier to like, I'm going to kind of get what value you're adding to this equation, and we can then work together to like, let's combine these things more effectively.
Do you build that into their onboarding then, whether it's a new salesperson or a new support person? Do they spend time in that cross-pollination conversation, on those calls?
We definitely do it from the support side. So everybody at Help Scout in every position does a week of support when they first start. So that gives them access, time spent with the customer, but also with the product, because our product is our support tool. So they get that benefit. I don't know that we do enough. I know that Tim, in our support sales side, he does record calls, and he will get in Slack and say, look, here's a really interesting call that I think people should listen to for these reasons. Like, this is what came out of it. And he'll stick those in a Dropbox for us. And I think it's really valuable use of time. I don't know that it's taken off to the same degree that the support side, which is really structured into the business.
Right. How about you, Dan? How are you guys looking at that?
So we do, everybody in the company does do support here as well, for a lot of valuable reasons, just to understand who our customers are and to put faces and names to our customers, because sometimes as you grow, your customer is just a word rather than a face or a name or a problem that needs somebody that needs help. But going back to like the where you're starting there with where do you start is you have to just say, this is based off of our experience, this is what we think is the best thing to do right now, and we're going to try this because of these reasons. And so we're going to hand off from sales to support in this way, or support from sales that way, or we're going to need to cross-pollinate. We need to appreciate. We need to do all these things between these two departments because it's what we think is best for our customer. And then you need to get buy-in from these two staffs. If you're small, it's a little bit easier. If you're trying to, join, a positive and negative ion at this point, it might be a little bit more difficult. But if you're small enough to say, hey, we think this is what's going to be best and this is how it's going to scale, and we need everybody to buy into this, and it's probably going to iterate as we go, everybody looks at it from a critical point of view and say, hey, here's some things that are falling apart, and this is how we might be able to do it better. We found success with that. We just started with the hypothesis that this would work. We started with an idea, and as we've gone and as I think Matt and I both have said, it's like it hasn't been a straight as the crow flies process. We've meandered, and we've lost some customers, but I think in the long run we've strengthened our process along the way so that a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, we're much farther ahead. And I think you have to be willing for some of those things to fall apart every once in a while.
Absolutely. You kind of need to break it to make yourself better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know we're going to wrap up because we're almost at the top of the hour, of the next hour. If you wouldn't mind, because I know people might be interested, hopefully they're very interested, Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about Pipedrive, and of course, Matthew, tell us a little bit about Help Scout so that people can get a sense of it, and I think you have some specials going on or something related to this, so I'll let you guys each take that.
Yeah, so I'll go first. So Pipedrive, we're CRM built for small teams. It's a lean product that's really flexible and customizable to fit your process. It's really focused on the end user, and so that your salespeople want to use the tool, not only because it helps them sell more, which in that case everybody wins. And right. So it's a pretty flexible way. Yeah, we are offering a discount. Anybody that wants to check it out, it's at I think pipedrive.com, and if you put in Help Scout at the end, you'll get a discount on your first few months.
Cool. Matt, you want to tell everybody about a little bit more of an overview about what Help Scout does?
Yeah, so Help Scout, it's customer service tools and software, primarily the help desk and the knowledge base and the kind of contact widget. The thing that makes Help Scout the help desk different, it's built from a customer perspective. So if you use some of those horrible IT help desks where you send your message in and you get that like weird number back that tells you that you used to be a person and now you're this number to us, and you have to go through their process and you log into their ugly portal and have a login and a password and you can never remember it, all that kind of stuff. So this is very different from that. It's like, let's make it as smooth from the customer side as possible. For them, they send an email, they get an email back, it just seems like a conversation. And you still get all the nice tracking and metrics and ability to handle things and add tags and all of that stuff on the business side. The customer doesn't have to get exposed to it. So those are the tools. You can get a free trial at Help Scout, and I think we have our Pipedrive discount there for Help Scout visitors, helpscout.com/Pipedrive. Just because we think that's a great combination. Pipedrive CRM integrating in, it makes your support team more powerful.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, we've reached the end of the hour, and I appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for attending, and those who stuck on to the very end, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. We hope everybody's had a great May and is kicking off June 1st with a good start to the month, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, gentlemen. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.